is rock and roll.
Good morning, class, or good afternoon if you are my 8th period class. 8th period, thank you for continuing along for the part 2. This is the part 2 session that should still be on Monday. Alright, today we're going more in depth of Vietnam, the Vietnam conflict, reflecting a little past, the few things that are going on during this time period. Alright, globally, we're discussing the Vietnam War. Here is again location of where Vietnam actually takes place. And whenever I reference the Gulf of Tonkin, this is the Gulf of Tonkin right here if you see where my cursor is. Down here, this is South Vietnam, and around this area is where Saigon is. This is where a lot of the conflict within the South takes off. Ho Chi Minh Trail will go along throughout here and even into here. So it kind of goes on into Laos, which becomes a huge site of conflict. Alright, continue on. The significance of the conflict. The Vietnam conflict itself costed the United States over $200 billion. This was part of LBJ's blank check theory. Approximately 60,000 United States men and women were killed. 3 million dead Indochina, and then destroyed the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson. As well, it ruined the United States credibility. It ruined the trust of the United States people. And if you got to think, we had the Rolling Thunder. The Johnson bombs North Vietnam significantly. And then we had other issues that took place, such as the Gulf of Tonkin. And eventually we tried to get on to the in America, it's becoming a rift. It's becoming almost a civil war within ourselves of to go to war, to not go to war, to stay in the war, to get out of war. It became this huge protest and uproar. So before we go into Vietnam, let's go over a little bit of their history. The historical background of Vietnam is that it was a foreign occupation for years, hundreds of years. Vietnam itself had never been a country on its own. It had been colonized throughout time by the Chinese, by the Mongolians, by the Japanese, and then eventually by the French. The French were colonizing Vietnam, and we kind of took in and started going in and aiding France through the Truman Doctrine. Take note of that. And then we started, giving more aid as Eisenhower's domino theory started to develop. So all these things are kind of leading us up into bringing ourselves into the historical background. But in the eyes of a Vietnamese person, for hundreds of years they had been nothing but people been in occupation. They had been under someone else's rule, so to speak, for so many years. And finally, until a guy named by the name of Ho Chi Minh, and this is a picture of him right here. When he takes order, he is dead set on on uniting Vietnam as a whole. And he is of the Buddhist faith, and he is huge in going with the pheasants. He sleeps like the poor people. He dresses like the peasants, and he really tries to get them to be more of the workforce of the area. The United States kind of, like I said, was getting involved. They rejected Ho Chi Minh because he was more of a dictator, more of a communist, and he was a threat because he was supported by China, who had already in turn fell to the domino theory. And the domino theory, we were scared that we were going to lose Southeast Asia. So we were really spent on making sure that we were not going to lose Southeast Asia. So going on, the conflict itself, if you remember, we had the Cold War, the containment theory. We were wanting to contain communism. This is the preventing of the spread of communism. This is kind of how we start developing into it. Truman Doctrine, as I said, is President Truman's policy of providing economic and military aid to a country to help prevent communism. You need to take note of this. Then we are falling to Eisenhower's domino theory. The fear that, if Vietnam falls, then Laos will fall, and then Cambodia will fall, and we will be losing Southeast Asia if we allow Vietnam to fall to communism. Then we have, we know that Vietnam was the first domino of the domino theory, especially in Southeast Asia. And eventually, as the war prolongs and continues and grows and keeps going down, we even turn to Vietnamization, and this is the empowering and the equipping of the Vietnamese people to take over their country again. And one of the big key players in this was Nixon until he didn't go well with it. Moving on, as we were kind of going back, I guess, the United States, we wanted to divide Vietnam. We knew that Ho Chi Minh had successfully arranged the North, so we tried to take on the South and colonize the South more to help them, empower them to fight the North and the communist reign. We held democratic elections. However, like you could think and kind of imagine, we kind of got an overall aspect of who was going to win. There were two people up for we were going to hold elections. Who's going to get the South rep? And then the Diem was not gonna win. So go figure. As you know, it would be. The elections are canceled, and Diem is brought in as the elector. So the Diem he runs as head for the South from 1955 to 1963, and here's a picture of him, the leader of the South. He was a Catholic. He was anti-communist and he was pro-Western, so he was always all kind of things as a Diem. And in so doing this, we are nonetheless almost erupting this civil war that is about to take place in Vietnam. The North, the communists, the hostility that they have towards the South, who honestly has not really that much difference. It was just who kind of was over them. In the North, there's no support. The going of the Civil War. No, they have no free speech. They push people to support Ho Chi Minh up in the North, and they rebelled the South. There were many rebellions in the South as well because of the North. A lot of peasants were more pushing towards the Ho Chi Minh philosophies and sayings. If you would look at the North and the South, and this is talking about Vietnam, in the North you had the North NVA, the North Vietnamese Army. These were the hostility. They used a lot of guerrilla warfare, tunnel tactics to outsource, outmanner, and outsmart the United States and the South. They had this idea of reunification. They wanted to bring the North and the South as one, and they wanted to expel the foreign powers, which who could blame them? For hundreds of years, they've seen other countries come in and take on, so they were ready to kind of, move on forward. As well, they are also, and they will be known as the Viet Cong, and they had a repopulation of military forces. On the flip side, the South, they propped up the Diem. Unfortunately, the people weren't happy with the Diem because he was Catholic and not Buddhist. That did cause a lot of rifts and a lot of protest. So in a way, you can kind of see how the South is starting to kind of dwindle, and its tensions not only with the North, but with even the United States are starting to really come up in an uproar. The Army was the Republic of the Vietnam. And the peasants started to beginning, really, as I said, support Ho Chi Minh. So, in the grand scheme of things, you have this huge civil war, the North communist, South not communist, if you want to look at it like that. And they're at this standstill. You have the North, Ho Chi Minh, the South, the Diem, and their ideals are different. However, Ho Chi Minh has the popularity and the design authority to kind of get into the South through something he calls the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and he can start brainwashing these peasants. And his direction was to enlist the poor to raise up the rich. This is a protest of a Buddhist monk who set himself on fire as a retaliation of the Diem. He refused because the Buddhist population was huge in South Vietnam and in Vietnam itself. If you have any historical background to Vietnam, Buddhism is a great thing. And when the Diem was elected, since he was Catholic, he canceled a lot of the Buddhist holidays, their religious days, the events that would take place. So this was kind of set to be more of a attack on them. Eventually, the Diem is assassinated, and this is actually a CIA cover-up. JFK actually had the Diem assassinated as it was coming in, leakage was coming in that the Diem was kind of moving towards more of the Ho Chi Minh philosophy and giving up on the Western ideas and moving more to communist. So as a result, JFK has the Diem assassinated, and as we know, not long after, he is assassinated himself. Chaos starts taking off in Saigon because of that. We saw many different things, especially because now they're without a leader. The people are starting in an uproar. And then we have in 64, right here's the Gulf of Tonkin. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution is passed. This is, I need to take note of this. This is where the president has the power to basically conduct acts of war if necessary. And LBJ comes to the Congress and says, we've been attacked. Now, in reality, the attack itself was not the Vietnamese, but it was due to a storm that the Americans actually bombed their own ship. So, does the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution have any say-so? No, it doesn't, but it's passed. And as a result it's passed, we go full-fledged into war in Vietnam, sending thousands of troops and sending millions of money. Another guy that you need to know, and he was kind of the head of the Vietnam soldiers, was General William Westmoreland. He went on many different convoys and took many different actions, and through his heroic standpoints and ideals, Vietnam at times was seen as success. The goals of the war were some, you can take note, we have Robert S. McNamara. If you'll pause this video right now and kind of go on to Google and look him up, that would be to your best benefit, because he is a very interesting man. He basically comes in and tells Americans that we are winning, that we need to limit the war on Vietnam, but we need to stop the Viet Cong, and we need to go in and prop up in Saigon. This needs to be where the American embassy is, and this is where the home base needs to be. We need to go in and separate the civilians versus the combats and convenience the South of the United States goals. As a result of this war, as I said, it is apostrophized. When America goes to war, you have this huge group of young people, college kids, women, who go on this rant of an anti-war movement. And the anti-war movement is not just your normal protest. This is a protest that lasted for years, and it many times became violent. They really pushed the freedom of speech movement. Buddhist monks were attacked, and they forced Southern civilians to support the NLF, the HO, wanted to get our troops out. Here's an example of a protest, and they're called the silent majority. You'll hear the silent majority a lot throughout this entire lesson about who are these silent majority people. Here's an example. Pause the video and take a note. Alright, so this was an impossible war, so to speak. People thought that. And in 1965 to 1968, the escalated troops that went to Vietnam were 550,000. They went on missions known as search and destroy. We had the carpet bombings, body count. People would go, and when they came back, it was just who made it, who didn't. Fighting in the fierce of the jungle, in the tunnels of the mountains. That's where the Vietnamese people, they came out of the tunnels. VC initiated 90% of the firefights. It was many a times it was destroy the village to save it. We had these strategic helmets. Many protests were taking place. You can have taken notes to add this. Berkeley demonstration. Then you have the Kent State protest. These two are highly important. Berkeley and Kent State are two colleges that acted out as a result of this. So this impossible war is it's truly making an uproar in the United States and really developing and critiquing many of the issues that are taking place. If you'll, 8th period, if you will kind of look at this right now, here's your question that you need to answer. I would like you to make a T-chart reflecting the pros and the cons of Vietnam at war, at least 3 on each side, and that will serve for this video that you have actually watched, just so I can kind of make mental note that you've actually watched it. These notes will be due on Wednesday or on Thursday to ensure that you did take notes and understand all of the information. If you will continue to part 3 of the 4-part series of Vietnam, you can just click exit out of here now and move there.